of the Potomac RPG Podcast. What do you mean I can't reload after my failed persuasion check?
Welcome one and all to the Potomac RPG Podcast, your source for old news, tired conversation, and mediocre advice for all of your favorite tabletop role-playing games. I am your host and paper doll inventory, Adam.
I'm your link to rescuing Zelda, Nick.
And I'm your needlessly complex skill tree system, Steve.
Oh, today is going to be special, my friends. Not only do we have a great topic in store for you today, but we're also welcoming Nick for his very first appearance on the podcast. Nick, say hello and everybody cheer.
Yeah. Hey.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Welcome to the show.
About time.
Yeah, I know. It only took eight episodes.
It took a while,
He had to make sure this thing was going to stick before he took his time, you know?
Exactly.
He's a popular dude.
It's got to be a good thing. All right. So, yeah, we're going to get into this week's topic here. We're going to be talking about something very near and dear to our hearts. That's video games, specifically RPG video games, and how tabletop role-playing games influence them, and particularly nowadays, how the reverse might be happening. So, Nick, let's drop you right into the fire here. What kind of RPG video games have you been into, and what influences do you see crossing over between video games and tabletop role-playing games?
So I'm part of the old school RPGs. So as far as video games go, I started off with I could probably associate with everybody else or most people, JRPGs like Final Fantasy and Chrono Trigger back in the day, and then the action RPGs like Zelda. Those were the basis of where I started, and actually, it was video games that introduced me to D&D, which, it could be the opposite for others, but that's usually where I'm coming from.
So in terms of within the last few years, what kind of RPG video games have you been into?
You probably know, Final Fantasy has been, evolving itself from going from more of a linear storyline to an MMO. Again, like I said, I'm old school still. I like that linear stuff. The MMO, great. It's not my cup of tea, but I'd say Final Fantasy. I've been trying to branch out and play more of Pillars of Eternity and Divinity: Original Sin, which kind of are like the more of the D&D that we're maybe used to.
So hold up. So you play a lot of Final Fantasy, Link, Zelda, all that. I've played all that. Anybody who hasn't had the pleasure of rolling up a party of 4 sprites in the original Final Fantasy and naming them, I think you had like 3 letters to name them with, is missing out. But what about the seminal CRPGs, computer RPGs like Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Planescape Torment? Just lots more that I'm not thinking of right now. Even before that, the gold box games, like the Dragonlance computer games, Dark Sun computer games, any of that stuff, or just strictly like playing on like Nintendo and all that.
Yeah, man. I grew up on console, so I wasn't huge into CRPGs back in the day. I think more so now. Like I said, like Baldur's Gate is, I guess you could say it's a little open world, but it is still a linear storyline that I'm going back to now. I don't know if you started with playing those computer RPGs, but I think it was the other way around for me. I started off with the basics. No,
I definitely the same way. I had a Nintendo long before I ever had a computer in the house. But and the sort of really old D&D, there was a sort of a renaissance of like really cool, and they're probably only great because I'm remembering them with rose-colored glasses games back on like the computer, like way back during second edition. There were like some Dragonlance games, some Dark Sun games that had a bunch of role playing going on. Those I sort of played on, like, my friend's dad's a computer nerd and he's got a computer, and we played on there. Like, none of us had our own computers back then, right? This is like, the early 90s. And then you go into a little later, by the time I was in my teens, like then stuff like Baldur's Gate and that the original started coming out. And those are definitely, more open world. They're not, it's no Skyrim, where you just go off and kind of do whatever you want. And if you're like me, you've never actually finished Skyrim's main plot, despite like 400 hours playing the game.
Sure.
But the cool thing about those games, like the Baldur's Gate, Icewind Dale, Baldur's Gate 2, Planescape Torment, and all that, I mean, they just released those remastered on Switch. These are like games that they've been released on like iPad OS. They've been released on Android, probably PlayStation, Xbox. I mean, these games just are fantastic to stand the test of time. And those are the sorts of games, when you think about, or when you ask me what I think rather about tabletop role playing and video games intersecting, for me, that's sort of like those are the pinnacle right there. Those are the most impactful. I mean, sure, you can look at something like EverQuest or World of Warcraft, and that's definitely got an RPG element. They borrow all these RPG themes, but there's something about those, probably because something like Baldur's Gate is literally based off of D&D. Yeah. Those types of games kind of have that strongest resonance for me personally.
Well, and I'm a bit of the opposite of you two, because my parents refused to get me any kind of gaming console for years and years, and we never had a Nintendo. Tool. We never had a Nintendo. The best I had was an Atari, which, don't get me wrong, was great even years later. But as all my friends were playing GoldenEye and stuff like that, I was behind a computer screen. So the good old days of the CRPGs is where I call home. So when you guys start talking about Final Fantasy and stuff like that, that's still pretty foreign to me, because I don't think I've ever played a Final Fantasy game, just because I've never had the opportunity growing up. And by the time I had a PlayStation, hell, I think I was in college or something like that. So I'm an old fart. So CRPGs have been my home. And like you said, Steve, Baldur's Gate, the original, I mean, just going back to those days and Fallout and all that, that's what I was into. So we got a good mix here of different backgrounds that should make some things interesting. And instead of leading off with a question from the internet, we're going to start with an older but interesting article by Justin Wu titled "Gaming Literacy: The Influence of Tabletop RPGs on Video Games." Now, this article really digs into a good bit on the history of tabletop role-playing games and its influence, going all the way back to Richard Garriott's, I can never say it, Akalabeth. Is that how that's said? I think World of Doom.
Your guess is as good as mine.
And dips into topics like combat, morality, procedural generation, stuff like that. Steve, you read through the article here. Anything that you find interesting in this?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to see someone sort of sit back and say, look at all these sort of common tropes that we have in games we play, as diverse as, like a Baldur's Gate or a Fallout, going all the way down the line to like a Call of Duty, where they have XP now, and sort of seeing how those sort of ideas originated in the tabletop role-playing world. I think that's, when you think about it logically, that makes a lot of sense. Video games are the newer medium. So creativity at a certain point and gaming to a certain extent wasn't really possible in an electronic medium. So it makes, I think, a lot of sense that originally this started with, pen and paper games. But it's really, like I said, it's neat to see how the influence is tracked over time. And good article, a lot of interesting stuff. I don't necessarily agree with all of it. There's a section that talks about, the binary morality system in games, as referencing things like the Paragon Renegade stuff, and say like a Mass Effect, or even just sort of the alignment of characters in a D&D game. And of course, in 5th edition, alignment's really taken a backseat, where it used to be a core part of character classes. There used to be classes you could only take based on your alignment back in 3.5, and certainly in 2nd edition. And 4th edition sort of did a different thing with alignment where they sort of just reduced the number of choices or whatever. So I know it's kind of it's on point nowadays to say that, alignment and all that's a relic of the past that we can do away with in our much more subjective and less objectively true world. But I kind of disagree. I think there's a lot of useful and interesting story impacts that come from that sort of thing. And I'm thinking back to the Mass Effect games, and certainly, I enjoyed having a morality system in the game. So hopefully that trend's not one that continues going forward.
Well, and I think it depends on how things are implemented, and I think that might be where it's kind of going to come back, where video games are going to start influencing tabletop, especially on that morality system, since morality has kind of dropped out of favor within TTRPGs. But I think the danger is so many video games get it wrong and very few get it right. I would think one of the best ones that got it right was Fallout New Vegas, in terms of that morality, where it was you're basically your reputation with different factions instead of this overarching good versus evil aspect. So I really liked the way they did New Vegas in that. Whereas some of these, I don't know if you guys ever do evil playthroughs on video games, but
all the time.
I would think the vast majority. Yeah.
I'm just going to guess, Nick, that you're definitely also an all the time kind of guy. You got that little bit of edge to you.
There you go.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Nick, what did you think of this article? Anything stand out to you?
I actually, just to keep going on the theme of the morality thing, Pillars of Eternity has there's a portion of it where they have 3 big factions that are part of this town, and depending on how you interact with these factions determines how your reputation is. So, some of these console games are at least now are trying to incorporate things. But one thing actually in the article that I thought was pretty interesting was this failing forward idea, where in video games, you have, kind of a restart button depending on, if you survive or if you die. But it kind of doesn't work in the TTRPG world. But incorporating that, they gave the example of Mass Effect having these, if you die, you have this alternate path that you go forward on. It'd be interesting to incorporate more of that into at least RPGs that we see on the console version of things.
Yeah, and I would think one of the areas that video games still lag behind in terms of TTRPGs is that the consequence of action, and because the whole save and reload aspect of video games has never gone away. And if any designer tries to make a game where you can't do that, it'll never fly. If you tell a gamer that, hey, whatever choice you make, you're stuck with until the end of the game, there's nothing you can do about it. You can't reload and choose something different. I can't see a game like that succeeding. However, in tabletop, like, you have a DM controlling thing. Once you make that choice, there is no going back. And I think that's why, video game RPGs never quite rise to the level that we want out of TTRPGs.
And I think the reason why you see that, Adam, at least in part, is that, think about, a video game. You can only script so many outcomes. You can only anticipate so many player choices. And also you can only give players so many choices to do so many things, because it doesn't have that flexibility of D&D or another TTRPG where you can say, to your, game master, what have you, hey, I want to do this. And then they just say, all right, that sounds like you're going to need to roll this and succeed on this and fail on this, and then sort of play it forward from there. So when you don't have the ability to be completely flexible, you already know you're playing within sort of, even if they're really broad, you're playing within lines. And so when you're playing in a line and you can't succeed, there's a desire then to just kind of go back, reload, and try something else again, because you can't take that failure and then roll it into something else and try a different approach. Usually you're just kind of gated from that content, and no one wants to feel gated from the content. So I think until you find a way to, make it so that it's a truly dynamic responding story, which I think is beyond anything we can probably do yet. It's going to be, for now, it's going to be really tough to get around that desire because, sure, I try to role play when I'm playing a game and not just go for kind of like the optimal outcome, but it kind of stinks to go and say, well, there's this thing that would be perfect for the build I've made for my character, but my roll went bad for this thing here, or there was a plot point that wasn't really obvious, whether it's my fault or the writers, and now I've missed out on it. Well, I kind of want to go back and reload because otherwise, why am I investing my time in playing this game? I'm here to have fun.
It's hard to be a completionist in TTRPGs, but it's really easy in video games. But go ahead, Nick.
No, I was just going to say, I could see a lot of people who are mainly focused on TTRPGs going to video games and, having limits set to them as far as their decisions having alternate consequences. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Absolutely. Yeah, it's an interesting article. It is a bit old, but it's an interesting article. And if you're interested in checking it out yourself, you can find that on gamecrate.com. That was by Justin Wu. It's called Gaming Literacy, the Influence of Tabletop RPGs on Video Games.
I have news here.
And the sound of Ralphie the News Goblin can mean only one thing. It is time for Potomac RPG News.
My boy Ralphie!
All right, we have a double shot of news this week. First up, they recently announced that League of Legends will be entering the D&D scape. It's called Legends of Runeterra, Dark Tides of Bilgewater. There was an article on Polygon written by Julia Lee that details the new universe replete with subclasses, races, religions, all that stuff. They even have characters like Misfortune and Gangplank in there. So here's a successful video game creeping its way into the tabletop world. Nick, let's get to you first on this. What's your thoughts on having League of Legends in your D&D?
I mean, I think it's a great thing. I mean, you have a video game system where it's based on, similar to D&D, where you have classes and races, and you're teaming up and basically fighting each other. I mean, I had a chance to kind of go through at least the source book, and I mean, just looking at the first sentence of the setting guide, it says, this place called Bilgewater is an independent port city, and it's founded by sea monsters, hunters, smugglers, pirates. I mean, it sounds like Baldur's Gate, and then going through like the character choices you have. I mean, they have these archetypes they can choose as far as I think as a fighter and a rogue. I mean, who doesn't like seeing different versions of character choices that you can have? I mean, I think it's a great thing to incorporate and introduce, others who maybe haven't played D&D to the D&D setting.
Steve, what do you think on this?
So here's where I go into like my old Grongard mode.
Yeah, I was waiting for it.
So let me backtrack a little bit. I think it's cool to have new content, new worlds being introduced to D&D into the hobby. I think there's a ton of people playing. They're coming from all different kinds of backgrounds, all different interest types. And if it's fun, absolutely go for it. I love it. Here's what I don't love. I don't love that it's slapped up in my D&D Beyond with all the rest of the official content. I've already got to deal with the Critical Role stuff in there. That's fine. But it just adds another layer of complexity about players being able to choose, what's available, what's not available. And quite frankly, it's not necessarily subject to the same kind of balance and review that I expect from everything else that I have in there. So if you don't use D&D Beyond, for example, you're probably not going to care as much about my critique. And it does, you can see a label, it slaps, this is partnered content on your D&D Beyond. But I think that just kind of opens up the door. I just picture like 5 years from now, I'm going to have 20 subclasses for every class that aren't even made by Wizards of the Coast or reviewed by Wizards of the Coast or play tested by Wizards of the Coast. That sits next to the official content, just to make my life difficult. Sure. Balance is important. It's just this goes back to a totally different topic that we don't need to go too far down the line on. But I love homebrew, but you got to be really careful with it, because if you start, just kind of having whatever, then none of the definitions or the meanings of the choices that are there, have as much weight to them anymore. It's like, I always see people trying to pitch me on, barbarian spellcasters as a subclass. And it's like, well, if Wizards does it, maybe then I'll take a look at it, because I know they've really thought about it and about the core conceits of the game and how it plays. But anything else, it's just, well, that was sort of one of the defining things about a barbarian. So, I'm very skeptical about putting homebrew from sort of a third party, just sort of in the same mix as everything else. I think you should really, carefully curate your homebrew for your game, so that it sort of keeps the integrity of the game. That's just my personal preference. So
I can understand.
Just initially, I just don't like having it there. It just rubs me the wrong way. It portends something that I'm concerned about. And of course, like everybody who is an old school fan of something, I'm sure I'm doing like the Tom Bombadil not being in Lord of the Rings or something like that. Other people are probably looking at me like, what's wrong with this guy?
Yeah, I could see a lot of old school people being more of in the realm of having the TTRPGs and the video game console systems being a little different, or at least the introduction of this. Blending.
Yeah, are you calling us old? Are you calling us old? Is that what I was hearing there?
I'm part of the group, so I'm included.
and like I said, I love the people bringing over content that they love from other mediums. Like that should absolutely be something that people do. I just don't necessarily want it held up alongside like the official content. Like, and again, this is a very D&D Beyond centric complaint. And but I think it makes sense to bring it up because it's a project that was partnered with D&D Beyond. That's sort of the conceit of the project. And so, putting it on the same, it's the same issue I have with, having the Blood Hunter and, Gunslinger stuff from Critical Role on there, is that, it's been there for so long. I just kind of accept it and I look past it when I think about what I'm doing with my character. No offense to anybody who likes that stuff, but I just don't want to have it sort of held up to be the same, there. I mean, I think an easy way to solve this, by the way, would just be for D&D Beyond to finally get around to having campaign level content management. I know they've talked about how they're going to do it eventually, where like if you have, so we have our Avernus game and I could just sort of click, no one can use Rick and Morty content because I don't know what you would use from that, but you can't use it. So no portal guns, I'm sorry. And then I could turn off like partnered content if I don't want it. But if there's something that I did like, I could toggle it on and say, yeah, you know what, that content we can allow in the game. Because the thing you hate is someone goes and builds out something for a character and they come to you and they're all excited to play. And then you have to tell them, oh, hey, I'm not allowing that at the table because I'm not sure it's balanced and I don't want to deal with it. That sucks. No one wants to have to do that.
I just don't like, when I first saw it, I'm like, League of Legends, like of all the things that you could bring into D&D, you chose one of the worst communities ever on the internet. Like I used to play League of Legends.
I was going to say, hopefully you have personal experience.
Yes, I have personal
otherwise, we're going to get a lot of hate mail.
There's a reason I don't play League of Legends now, primarily because I sucked at it.
So send it to Adam.
I was just awful at it. But the second thing is, man, it is a hateful community at times. It is a tough game to get into and stay into with the amount of flack that you get from everyone. And like it's been years since I played. Who knows? Maybe the community fixed itself. I highly doubt it, though.
But for what it's worth, I played Dota 2 a heck of a lot, and it's just as bad. So
is it?
I think that's just I have Twitter. Twitter's just as bad. I think that's just the internet.
Yeah, it might be, but I just and I thought just as a setting, I'm like League of Legends. Like I never played that saying, man, this is a great story. This is a great story, great universe. I mean, this is you could turn this into novels. It's such a deep and rich world. I've never thought that. There's so much out there that they could have brought in.
I think they got this Legends of Runeterra. Now I'm not all up on it, and if either one of you know, let me know. But I think they released some sort of new game that's like part of the League of Legends, like kind of universe, if you want to call it that. That's what which it is like. Legends of Runeterra, and that seems to be sort of the impetus to putting this out there. Like they're trying to turn it into more of an RPG, taking those elements and making. Which I mean, hey, there's lots of interesting stuff. I remember, again, I played Dota, not really League, But playing Dota 2, there was all kinds of cool lore that they built up. Like, this could be an interesting world to explore. You never got a chance to. So if they turned it into some kind of RPG, then I could see it sort of following from that. So maybe it makes a lot of sense now. I don't know.
Maybe I don't know. We'll see. I do agree with Nick. Whenever I look through the subclasses and stuff, it does look like they put it together pretty well. Like there was nothing in there that I was like, oh my God, they're destroying everything, with these subclasses or races or whatever. So, I mean, I don't think they did a bad job of porting. It was just really the setting or the universe that I didn't quite understand why that would be top of the list to have partnered content with League of Legends. But hey, who knows? It might turn out pretty well. Yeah, just to move on to the next news item, yesterday, we got another sneak peek of Baldur's Gate 3, along with an announcement. They'll be opening up early access for BG3 this August. Maybe, they said maybe, but this August. Now, this is exciting because in 2 months, we might be able to actually play some of this game. Now, I'm not a huge fan of early access normally, but I may have to make an exception for this. Steve, what do you think of this news?
Whoa. So hold on. You're telling me that my Baldur's Gate isn't enough for you? You need another Baldur's Gate? You're going to break your early access? I'm not a big fan of early access, but I don't get enough Baldur's Gate in my life, so I'm going to break it for this. What am I supposed to make
I wasn't playing your game when I was 15 years old, bud.
Well, I mean, whose fault is that? Certainly not mine.
That's true.
Because I was certainly D&D when I was 15. But no, totally digressing there a bit. I'm super excited. As I talked about, sort of in the intro there, definitely played the Baldur's Gate games back in the day. Love all that stuff. Planescape Torment is my absolute favorite game of all time. And it's the same sort of style of game. And I want to see this game go gangbusters. I've played Larian Studios, who's making it. I've played Divinity 1. I've played Divinity 2, or Divinity Original Sin, rather, 1 and 2. Really enjoyed them for what it is. That's one of the best sort of games that felt like it was playing a pen and paper sort of RPG, but on a computer or on a console. And they did a really great job of doing that. And from what I've seen, they've just sort of taken that and made it even better for this. So I'm super pumped. I might have to actually splurge on a PC so that I can play this sort of the way God intended, sure. with a keyboard and a mouse. It's really exciting to me. And quite frankly, I hope that it does so well that it spurs on additional games with D&D, sort of going forward, because I think there's a whole rich world of different stories to tell with D&D, and it would be great to see that happening again. Well,
Nick, what do you think on this announcement that happened yesterday?
I'm ecstatic. I mean, I think I might have to invest in a PC as well at this point. I think just playing like the Divinity games. I mean, it's just. I mean, they're just great games. I mean, you have characters in a world where you're interacting with other characters and NPCs, but then you're also interacting with the environment. I mean, there's so much going on in the game itself that I'm excited for what's in store for Baldur's Gate 3.
Well, Nick, you played Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2 as well, right? So what do you think in terms of they announced like the whole vertical aspect of gaming within BG3? What do you think of that addition of a more vertical play space?
I think it's great. I mean, it just adds another flavor to the whole RPG system. I mean, I think just from the graphics from being immersed in the game, I think it just adds more to it.
The more you can see things on the screen and say, I'd like my character to be able to do this. Like, wouldn't it be great if my character could knock this person off of a roof? And you can actually do that. Like, anytime a game allows you to do that sort of surprise and delight, that's just always going to be a plus in my book. It's not going to be playing tabletop RPGs, but it gets you that much closer where you can, and that's something that Larian's done really good with the Divinity Original Sin games, where like the environment sort of interacts with some of your spell effects, and you throw down fire and suddenly grass and stuff is starting on fire and people are getting burned, and then your next character comes in and casts some sort of rainstorm spell and puts out the fire, but now everybody's soaking wet, so if they get hit with ice, it's worse. But if someone tries to burn them with fire, maybe it's not as effective. So all these clever ways of just doing things like that would make intuitive sense, but usually a video game doesn't have the flexibility to let you do. And they're building in that flexibility and that sort of ability to be a little bit creative with how you're playing. And that gets you just a little bit closer to that tabletop experience. So that's always going to be a plus in my book.
Yeah. I mean,
I can't
I'm
think
excited.
of, sorry.
No,
Yeah, I can't think of any other game system that has been able to do that. Well, I mean, I guess currently.
Like in terms of the effects or the spatial?
I mean, all of it, like the effects as well as interaction with their environment. I can't think of any specific video game or even
I seem to remember, like, was it Dragon Age back years ago that kind of dabbled in that, where you could, set down an oil slick and then set it on fire. I can't remember if that was Dragon Age or not. I know certain games have tried to influence that a bit, but it seems like BG3 is going to rely heavily on that to kind of set up those movements, and that's why they broke initiative a little bit, where all of one side goes and then all of the other side goes, instead of kind of more sporadic or the real time with pausable combat kind of stuff. That way you could set up those combo effects, which I think will be interesting. I don't think any game has gone as far as BG3 is going to try to go with this.
Yeah, I'm excited. I can't wait. Let's get that early access.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. We'll see what happens. We'll see what happens in August. If it actually comes out on early access, I know I will be first in line to get it, and we'll have to have a show just on our first impressions and stuff like that. So we're going to take a quick break here, but we will be right back. So instead of our normal break here, I just wanted to reiterate something we covered last week. We pointed you to the hashtag blackaf roundtable that was held about a week and a half ago. Really wonderful and powerful conversation. If you missed it, please go back and watch it. And if you did see it, good news. Omega Jones, aka Critical Bard, held another one just a few days ago. The link will be in the show notes. Watch it, listen. The TTRPG community can be a very welcoming one, but we've got a long way to go, both as a hobby and as individuals. So please check it out. Thank you. And with that, let's get back to the show. All right, let's get into a post here. This one comes from Reddit user Doglatine, who asks, "It's frustrating and immersion breaking in RPGs when you enter a new hub and get 20 quests shoved at you all at once, but it's also annoying when you have to pursue quests in a linear order. Which RPGs manage quest giving the best?" Bit of context here. I'm in the middle of another playthrough of Baldur's Gate trilogy, and after finishing BG1 and Siege of Dragonspear, I just started BG2, and damn, I'd forgotten how many quests the game throws at you the second you enter a new area of Athkatla. Literally, NPCs coming up to me with various urgent business, and it's really immersion breaking and kind of stressful. Here's just one sequence. I'm told I need to go to the Copper Coronet pub to meet a contact behind the bar who can help me find profitable work. I enter the pub and I'm immediately embroiled in a pit fight. A few seconds later, a young woman, Nalia, asked me to help liberate her family home from trolls. So I head there, but I get interrupted by a scripted encounter with a poisoned harper, Renfield, who asked me to take him to the docks. I take him to the docks, but as soon as I arrive, my companion Yoshimo tells me that he has to check in with the Thieves Guild while he's in the area. Ignoring Yoshimo, I go drop off Renfield with his Harper friends at the docks. Having dropped him off, I immediately get accosted by an old frenemy, Czar, who asked me to infiltrate the Harper hideout to rescue his friend Monteron. I mean, just give me 5 effing minutes, dude. I just want to kill some trolls. It doesn't help that I'm trying to handle the game in a fairly RP heavy fashion, and it doesn't feel great to just take on an urgent quest and just leave it until I feel like it. But I appreciate there's no perfect solution here, so I'm interested, what games have you played that have managed to strike the best balance between linearity and player choice on the one hand, and on the other, aggressively shoving quests in the player's face versus making them look for them. So after that horrendously long post, Nick, let's turn to you first.
Just led with the last paragraph there.
Yeah,
too long didn't read was invented for this individual.
Yeah, might have to edit that out in post. Nick, which RPG has had the best quest mechanic for you? Like what quest giver kind of thing works best in your games?
At least just again mimicking off of what I've played before. Pillars of Eternity had a good, at least breakdown of keeping in mind the main storyline, as well as organizing any side quests that you had. I mean, from what I remember, at least on the computer and the console version, you had your PC that interacted with the other NPCs, and then whatever mission that came across was stored in this journal. Which, I mean, even with TTRPGs, you could do that too. Keep your own journal things. But I think it had a good balance of emphasizing the primary the mission, and then handling these side quests, but not overwhelming you to the point where you just got bogged down and just kind of gave up on things.
Sure. Well, Steve, what do you think in terms of quest giver mechanics?
I don't think I have a clear answer on this one. I don't think that I've ever really given it too much thought. I was thinking about a lot of different games that I've played when I read this voluminous question, and I was thinking about Witcher 3, for example, is a game where I just my memories of it, I haven't played it in a bit, but it felt like I was just overwhelmed by the sheer volume of quests. I remember getting annoyed because I'd over leveled the content so hard just by sort of tracking side quests before I ever got to the Isle of Skellige. And then something like Skyrim, where if I'm recalling correctly, and it's been a little bit since I've played, but I've done tons of quests there, and a lot of them you just sort of stumble into the quests. You can certainly find someone as a quest giver to sort of start it off for you, or find an item or a piece of paper somewhere that you read and it starts the quest. But you can also just kind of stumble in. Well, I found the tomb of so-and-so, and that's sort of a quest line. Well, it will sort of push me into that quest line, even if I haven't, found the quest giver. So I guess the quest giver gets to be less in my face and annoying about making sure I activate the quest so that I can follow through. But, I think that's just a consequence of a game giving you a lot of options for things to do. It has to present those options to you. Because I can see someone complaining that the immersion's broken because they didn't have the sort of start of the quest, someone saying, "Hey, hero, I need you to go on this quest for me." And then somehow they're in the midst of the quest. That doesn't make any sense. But then if you've got 50 guys coming at you saying, "Hey, I've got this thing I need you to do for me," that can be problematic as well. So that, there's no perfect way to do it.
Yeah, I think it's an inherent deficiency within video games that I don't see how you get past, because the whole thing about a tabletop RPG is the DM is controlling the pace of those quests and when they show up, and how it impacts the story, whereas an AI is just not going to be as flexible in that regard. So yeah, I understand the immersion break, but you're also playing a video game. There's only so immersive, so much immersion you can have before you reach the limits of the media that you're using to tell that story. So I understand it. Like, and there's nothing I hate more than a freaking exclamation point over a head of somebody. Like
that's what I was going to say, because that's how is it you do this without having an indicator that you need to talk to these NPCs? They have to come to you. So, whatever, the so-and-so, the ally of this character this guy's going through a story, Yoshimo, because he's got to let him know, "Hey, partner, I've got a quest we need to go on." Otherwise, what's he going to do? He's just going to have an exclamation mark over his head. And then you don't interact with people that aren't quest givers. And so that just breaks the immersion that way, because you're just going, okay, these people are all useless NPCs. These ones are useful. And, you have some games, they'll have like that's just a commoner and they don't even have a real name or something like that. That's old school, and that's not satisfying for its own part. So it's, what are you going to do?
Did you guys ever play the MMO for Final Fantasy? I don't know if you guys did, but Anthony and I try to give that at least a good solid effort. And I think at least I kind of lost interest in it because there were so many quests and so many things that you kind of lost a sense of the main storyline. I guess that's typical of MMOs, where you just kind of keep it open, and that's, where, characters are just there and they all meet other characters and decide on what to do. But I kind of, that ended up kind of losing interest, just because it was so open. There were so many quests. You kind of just got bogged down on what should I do next, and you didn't know where to go.
Yeah, I think being open and having a lot of quests don't necessarily need to go hand in hand, right? Because, Skyrim, just going back to that example, is probably one of the best examples of an open world game with a lot of quests built into it. Same with, Breath of the Wild, just to go with a different example. There's quests built in there, but they weren't so overwhelming. You had to still hunt down the quests, and there was still a measure of logical order to them. Maybe they were ordered by sort of location or faction or something like that. But if you're just getting spammed with all these, especially when they're like really menial ones, like get me 3 knoll tongues and 15 fuzzleberries, and I'll give you this
grind. Love the grind.
Exactly. Give me 15 fuzzleberries because I can't get them myself. They're over there in those bushes. It's like, dude, this guy just gave you 15 right beside me. He's in my party. I don't know. How many fuzzleberries do you actually need? What are you doing with all these fuzzleberries? Is there a fuzzleberry racket that's going on? Questions I want to know the answers to. But unfortunately, games being what they are, not tabletop RPGs, you just can't get those answers. It's unsatisfying.
Yeah. So, for a Reddit user, Doglatine, we definitely feel that frustration. But unfortunately, until someone comes up with some kind of innovation that offers a flexibility of quest giving where the AI can learn on the go and kind of parse those quests out, I can't see us going back to old school days where you have to hunt around for someone to give a quest by clicking on random commenters and suddenly one says something. Like I love that idea, but in practice it doesn't seem to work. Like people get annoyed that they can't find the next thread in the story. Some designer out there is going to fix this at some point, hopefully, but for now I'm afraid it's just a fact of life. So we feel your pain, but at least there's comfort in having people in company in your misery. So hang in there. So to get into the next segment, most of us have had a pretty long history with video game RPGs. Many years spent mouse clicking and button mashing for endless hours in front of a bright blue screen. So let's see just how much you guys do remember about those days with a little test of video game RPG knowledge. Listeners, it's trivia time. Welcome to Trivia Time, where we pit our two guests against each other in a battle of game knowledge and history. Steve, you won the last Trivia Time, so let's see if you can hold on to your, crown, belt, decorative sash?
Championship.
Perhaps?
Definitely a championship.
Definitely
a sash. Is it a sash? All right. So here's how it'll work. Now we're going to change
something Mean Gene.
Yeah, there it is. The belt. Now we're going to change things up a little bit this week. As always, you're allowed to ring in early, but if you do, I'm going to stop reading and you'll have to answer the question without hearing the rest. Also, now you'll lose a point if you get an answer wrong. So a little bit more on the line here. First one to buzz in gets to answer. Yeah. You get it right, you get the point.
Rises to the top.
Get it wrong, you lose a point, and your opponent gets a chance to steal. You guys ready?
Let's do this.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, let's go.
Here we go. All right, let's get into the first question. So I'm going to read the question. It is multiple choice unless you ring in early. Number 1. Come a hero from the east. Free the man from the beast. Bring the child out of the band. And drive the ogress from the land. So you want to be a hero. This was the subtitle of what Sierra Adventure RPG series first game, which has you solving the problems of the village of Spielberg. Might and Magic, King's Quest, Quest for Glory, or Legend of Corandia? Steve.
I'm going to go with King's Quest.
That is incorrect. You're at -1. Nick, you have a chance to steal.
Oh boy, it's gonna be a guess.
Well, you don't have to guess.
Yeah, I'm gonna stay. I'm gonna say I don't know and hold my position here.
All right. The answer was Quest for Glory. So 0 to -1. That's a first on the show. All right. Question number 2. After the creation, the cruel god Moloch rebelled against the authority of Marduk the creator. Moloch stole from Marduk the most powerful of all the artifacts of the gods, the amulet of Yendor, and he hid it in the dark cavities of Gehenna, something like that, the underworld, where he now lurks and bides his time. Which ASCII-based RPG classic featuring everything including a kitchen sink asks you to recover the amulet of Yendor from Moloch and ascend to demigodhood? Moria, NetHack, Angband, or Rogue?
Oh man.
All right, that would have been NetHack. So still 0 to -1. Come on, guys. I thought you got a history here.
Game.
I've never heard of it.
Number 3. Entrusted to deliver an uncounted purse of gold, thou dost meet a poor beggar. Dost thou A, give the beggar a coin, knowing it won't be missed? B, deliver the gold, knowing the trust in thee was well placed? Which series of role-playing games developed by Origin Systems not only ask the player to save the world multiple times, but to do so in a virtuous manner as the avatar of Britannia? Fantasy, Lands of Lore, Ultima, or the Magic Candle? Steve.
Ultima.
Very good. Well done. All right.
Wow.
Tie score at 0-0. Man, just there's a burner here. Question number 4.
Yeah, if you came up with a game that maybe existed in sometime after the 80s.
Hey, I am old. Okay, I'm allowed to have these. Question number 4.
Did you play any of these games?
Yeah, I've played a few that are on this list. Question number 4. Long ago, when magic still prevailed, the evil wizard Mangar the Dark threatened a small but harmonious country town called Scarabray. Evil creatures oozed into Scarabray and joined his shadow domain. Mangar froze the surrounding lands with a spell of eternal winter, totally isolating Scarabray from any possible help. Then one night, the town militiamen all disappeared. The future of Scarabray hung in the balance. This is the setting for what 1985 Electronic Arts classic? The Bard's Tale, Temple of Apshai, Wizardry, or Telengard? Nick.
Is it Wizardry?
It is not. I'm sorry. -1 point to you. Steve, a chance to steal.
Do I lose a point if I'm wrong on a steal?
Of course you do.
No.
Let's roll the dice. Bard's Tale.
The Bard's Tale is correct. Well done. All right. So
wow.
it is now 1 to -1 in favor of Steve. Question number 5. It's dangerous to go alone. Take this. Thus begins the set. Oh, Steve?
The Legend of Zelda.
Legend of Zelda is correct. Well
Yeah.
done. That was an easy one. 2
That's
to
like a meme.
-1.
I feel bad taking that one.
Question number 6. Your mission, to seek out and explore strange new worlds, to boldly go where no man has gone before, to establish contact with any sentience, and to keep from getting brutally killed. What classic spacefaring RPG puts you in command of a ship from Arth to meet aliens, find colonizable planets, and investigate the galaxy for clues to the mystery of the ancients? Knights of the Old Republic, Star Control 2, Starflight, or Legacy of the Ancients? That would be Starflight. You guys ever hear of that?
I've never heard of that one.
Oh,
Starts
man.
off sounding a lot like it's going to be a Star Trek.
Yeah, I was gonna just
Yeah, that's what I
say
thought
that.
first.
But
All right, well, moving on. It's still 2 to -1. Question number 7. War. War never changes. In 2077, Steve, that was quick. What's the answer?
That's Fallout, baby.
That is Fallout, baby. Well done. 3 to -1. Number 8. Lord Librasulus looked down upon Theron and commanded him, "Bring me back the fire staff. Without it, I cannot enter the dungeon and seek the power gem. Only when the two are united will I, your master, have the power to banish chaos. Only then will the world know a new age of order. What first-person dungeon crawl features you controlling a party of adventurers on a quest to recover the Fire Staff and defeat Lord Chaos? Diablo, Eye of the Beholder, Dungeon Master, or Dark Heart of Urkrul? That would be Dungeon Master. You guys don't remember Dungeon Master?
I don't. Sounds like you're the bad guys in that one.
Yeah.
Staff merge with the crystal, banish everything, establish a new order. Like, you know, that just sounds like I should hear the Imperial March playing. A new order.
All right. Now, you still got a chance here, Nick. You're not out of the game yet. Question number 9. The Lord of Murder shall perish, but in his doom he shall spawn a score of mortal progeny. Chaos shall be sown from their... Steve?
This is Baldur's Gate.
It is Baldur's Gate. Good job.
I mean, that one's kind of 10. A gimme for me. You should feel bad about that one.
I don't. All right. Question number 10. What can change the nature of a man? This question is the theme for what game which puts the player into the role of the immortal Nameless One on the most important and heroic quest of all, to know oneself.
That would be my favorite game of all time. Planescape Torment.
Okay. Well, so, yes, that is correct. But I didn't realize that all of these questions fit in with your specific background of gaming knowledge. So well done for ruining Nick's day here. His first appearance on the show, and you just like,
you know something, brother? I ate the vitamins. I said my prayers and did my exercises, dude. And he brought his best game, brother, but it just wasn't enough to beat up Steve-a-mania.
All right. Well, congratulations. Congratulations, Steve, on your victory. You are still the champion of trivia time. Good job. Yay.
Am I the first two-time champion?
I believe you are.
The reigning, defending, undisputed Potomac RPG trivia champion of the world.
Moving right along. All right. The last post we're going to get into this week comes from Reddit user Dicer1998, who asks, what was the worst case of a player trying to apply video game logic to a tabletop role-playing game that you've seen or heard about? Title is self-explanatory. Time to share times when players just couldn't understand that video game logic is, well, illogical in tabletop role-playing games. Steve, anything interesting you've seen regarding video game logic in a tabletop game?
Yeah, sure. I think, rather than one very specific example, I think it's an overall trend. It's let's all talk about what our characters are going to do in the midst of a combat, sort of going back and forth and trying to put together a strategy for a round that really exists in about a 6-second space. I think, anyone who's played any sort of D&D and similar games has probably come across that, where players are, understandably need a little flexibility because you're not, a wizard who can summon arcane magics and think through all the permutations of that. But you'll see it's like 5 minutes to for one person to take a turn that takes 6 seconds because they're planning everything out and getting input for, well, you can, but if I do this, you can do that then, right? So I'll go over here and you go there, which, yeah, sure, you can pause and plan in a computer role-playing game or a video RPG, but not really in a tabletop RPG.
Well, Nick, how about you?
Yeah. I think the biggest thing is there's no real restart button with TTRPG. So, I know I've played video games before where, I chose a PC and I thought it was going to be a great PC, and then it ends up being maybe the complete opposite. And then, you could just, again, restart the whole game, start with a new character. You can't really do that with a TTRPG. You kind of have to go with it, stick with it. And then, the advantage of that is that, as your character progresses, you get, different experience, different things added on, which may change where you initially thought your character was going to be or will be. But I could see that's
a great observation.
Yeah, that is a great point.
I mean, it makes me think about the fact that, in a lot of games, people will refuse, even in a tabletop game, to do things that are suboptimal, or to pick things that are suboptimal, or to play their character in a way that's less than, trying to do the best at everything they do every time they try to do it. That's, in a video game, you're the protagonist, you're the only person who matters, and it's a sort of gateway to you progressing across the story to do things well or to get a high roll or what have you. Whereas in a role playing game, and goes back to that article and that point you mentioned, Nick, earlier about failing forward. Failing in a tabletop role playing game can actually be just as rewarding or even more rewarding than succeeding. And so people need to I think they need to try to embrace that and bring that into the tabletop space, because when you treat it like a video game where you either win or lose, it can become very unsatisfying very quickly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
and I just realized that I'm guilty of this. Just the other over in Anthony's campaign, I was asking Anthony, like, hey, can I go back and choose a different subclass or ASI or whatever? Like I just recognized that I'm just as guilty of this crap as your normal video game people, and that's a great point. I never realized that I'm part of the problem, Nick.
I mean, I used to do that when I started D&D. I would never know what character I wanted to be because there were so many choices. But then, you had to commit and just go with it.
Yeah.
One thing I would say, you just want to distinguish, right? It can be really tough in a role playing game, a tabletop role playing game, when you're going to play for, some campaigns can go 6 months, a year, 2 years, longer, and picking something that's fundamentally unsatisfying for you to play, if that's where you're at, I mean, I think there's some validity there to saying, hey, look, this is my fun time, and I don't mind failing forward, but the core of this character, class, concept, whatever, isn't really working for me, and sort of swapping out of that, I think is probably acceptable. I personally, I think about it more in just the context of, role playing through a scenario. I certainly want, that realism and that failing forward to develop, but it's hard if you just take a really bad, I took sharpshooter feat and then it turned out I really want to play a melee focused character. I mean, that's a pretty big nerf compared to the rest of the group.
Yeah,
true.
So something like that, maybe you've got a little bit of flexibility, but certainly your character can't be good at all things at all times too.
Yeah.
So just my 2 cents.
I think the one for me is kind of combo. Number one, this idea that, and some TTRPGs might do this better, but like I can just carry around all the crap in the world, so long as my weight is under my limit or whatever, which like Rushka in our current campaign can carry like 900. Oh, she can push 900 pounds, but she can something ridiculous. And you just imagine, like, if you were to picture this person in real life, what kind of gear they would have on, like just a normal character who has, an encumbrance of 150 pounds or something like that. Can you imagine seeing somebody with 150 pounds of equipment and like 3 pieces of armor and all this stuff we just take for granted video game style that, it's within the weight, so I can carry it. And then the other is like the idea that you're going to find something useful or valuable on everything, everywhere, whether it's coin, whether it's materials or whatever. So if I, go through this dungeon and I kill these robed occultists who don't have pockets, so suddenly they have 100 gold on them for some odd reason. So that I think we all fall into that. It's just the nature of the game, but that's some video game logic right there.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. I do try to keep that sort of thing in mind, but also don't want to have you guys, having to bring a donkey down into every dungeon you go into just so you can lug stuff back out. Though, I have to say, I'm thinking back to like playing 2nd edition in that, I feel like that was more of a consideration back then. Like everybody was thinking about having mounts and things like that because you're going to need to carry all that loot you're getting out of the dungeon. Because of course that was the core concept of the game. Forget this high-minded concept plots. Let's go in the dungeon, smash some faces, and take their stuff. It was a big part of the game.
Yeah, it was. Well, I appreciate it, guys. That is going to do it for us this week. Remember, if you want to send in your questions or anything you find on the internet, you can send them to questions@potomacripg.com. And if you'd like to support the Potomac RPG podcast, you can find us on coffee.com/PotomacRPG, all one word. I realized I was saying that incorrectly the other week. That is coffee, ko-fi.com/PotomacRPG. And lastly, you can follow us at Potomac_RPG on Twitter and at Potomac RPG on Instagram and YouTube. Whew. Nick and Steve, thanks for being on this week. It was great. And thank you to the rest of the Potomac RPG crew. And of course, all of our wonderful listeners out there. So for the Potomac RPG podcast, I'm Adam.
I'm Nick.
And I'm Steve.
till next time, keep those dice rolling, keep those stories coming, and never stop playing.
Stop playing.
Like we were so far off. That was awful.
Close. It was
mostly Nick.
It could have been worse.
First time.
First timer. Yeah, first time.
It's just like basically like bullshitting with you guys. Like I have too much fun doing this.